Hi everyone, welcome back to Low Carbon Higher Power. Today I'm with Paul Gilligan, CEO of Pure Leapfrog, a charity that works with communities to develop sustainability projects with positive environmental and social impact, with a particular specialism in community energy. The Diocese of Bath and Wells has partnered with Paul and Pure Leapfrog for a feasibility project funded by the Southwest Net Zero Hub, exploring whether our churches, schools, halls and diocesan land could help generate renewable energy for the benefit of local communities. In simple terms, we're asking whether church assets could be used to reduce bills, cut carbon, support local people, and create a community energy model that could potentially be scaled across the diocese and maybe even beyond it. Welcome to the podcast, Paul. Are you excited to be on, as I have to have you on?
Well, thank you, Dan. Look, it's a real pleasure to be here. You and I have been chatting for a long time now, going back over a couple of years,
Yes.
I think, before we actually started collaborating. So it's been a long time coming, and a really interesting journey to get to where we are, and a great, interesting and rich project to be delivering.
Yes,
with
indeed.
yourselves. So I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent.
And it's a lovely city.
It really is.
First time in Wells.
The smallest city, allegedly, as well.
Yeah, it's really nice.
So jumping right in at the deep end, Paul,
Yeah.
what on earth is community energy in normal people speak?
Wow, okay. So this could have been a fairly straightforward question to answer a number of years ago, but the energy space has moved very quickly and community energy has moved with it. A number of years ago, I would have said that community energy is where communities come together, grassroots level communities come together, and they raise money to invest in energy assets. So things such as solar panels. Communities have invested in wind turbines before now. And they find ways to sell the energy that those energy assets produce. And I guess it's like a community shop. The community owns the business and benefits from the revenues that come back into that business and the surpluses that the business creates. The surpluses that community energy groups create are often known as community benefit funds, and they are often reinvested along the lines that have been decided by the community. So some communities might prioritise more environmental projects and sort of faster decarbonisation for their community. Others might prioritise supporting members of the community who might be struggling to pay their energy bills and providing them with advice, providing them with maybe some small measures like low energy light bulbs, radiator foils, that kind of thing, or providing small grants to people. So it's very open as to what might be done with those funds. As I said, it's been changing a lot. So in the energy space now, people may be familiar with things like being able to charge their EV for lower prices, batteries being operated by your energy supply companies, what we call flexibility within the sector. And lots of new models are emerging, and even domestic retrofit, making homes more energy efficient to begin with. And communities are getting involved in that as well now. So it's starting to really grow outside of the definition that I may have given a number of years ago.
Yeah. And, obviously it's it's a very broad sector, as you've just said, community energy, but where do Pure Leapfrog fit into all of that?
So we're 21 years old this year. And we, as an organisation, we're actually formed from the merger of two organisations that were each formed in, I think, around 2005, 2007. And we, as an organisation, were formed by people that were very much based in the professional services sector within the City of London. So solicitors, consultants, financiers, who felt as though they had skills and tools and resources that they could share with communities to help communities to develop their own sustainability projects, such as within community energy. And Pure Leapfrog was formed in that way, drawing on that expertise and those skills from that sector, and was a very early mover in community energy. We developed a lot of our own finance models, energy models. We started to develop what's called project development, sort of tools and pathways to help communities create their energy projects and get them funded. We've got a template library of legal documents. So really providing all of those professional services support to communities, from project management through to sort of legals and finance.
Wow, so quite a broad brush of stuff that you're doing there. Yeah. Excellent. Must keep you busy.
Very busy.
Yeah. So it's like slightly circling back to the what is community energy. I understand it can sort of vary depending on the situation, but say, for example, a school wants to engage in a community energy project. In actual practice, what does that actually look like? Where does the money come from? Like, what does the school pay? Those kind of things. How does it actually look in practice?
Sure. So again, we're sort of back to the simple model, which is a great way to explain it all, okay? What would happen is an existing community energy group or a new community energy group for whom it might be their first project would partner with the school. They'd chat to them about this very model, this approach, and they would hopefully get the agreement from the school to partner whereby the community invests in, let's say, some solar panels that can go on the roof of the school and get wired into the school's mains, in simple terms, to help feed all of the sockets that run the computers and the overhead projectors and electric whiteboards and whatever it is these days. And when the sun is shining and the panels are producing energy, that energy flows straight to the sockets. It doesn't flow through the meter. So it's not making the meter turn, which means that they are not buying that energy from their normal supplier. They're just getting it fed from the panels that are on their roof. Now, what we've provided to communities is like a lease agreement.
Okay.
So that the school can enter into a peppercorn lease arrangement with the community energy group. The group puts the panels up there with essentially zero lease costs, but with the security that having invested in those panels, they know that they're going to be there for the term of the lease, often 20, 25 years. And the school also enters into a power purchase agreement with the community. And so just the energy produced by the panels is monitored, and a price is agreed between the school and the community for paying for that energy. And that's essentially how it's done. The community finance the panels, often through what are known as community shares. So it's a way of providing an investment opportunity, again, back to members of that same community. And it's a real investment. It's a specific security that is that's been created by and is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. But it is capable of being marketed as an investment opportunity with much lower requirements than if you were to, I don't know, try and float a company on the London Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
It's a community share. And we've got qualified community share practitioners at Pure Leapfrog who help communities raise that kind of capital.
And these community shares, so that's essentially a way, again, like you said, like people can like buy into the project essentially, and that they can get returns on those investments as well.
Yeah.
So like it's quite an interesting way. I mean, that sort of social environmental investments become so much more popular these days. I mean, for most people, you might stick some money into an ISA or something like that, but this is an alternative way that you could invest your money and get a return as well.
Absolutely, it is. And at the moment, in today's market, community share offers are going out at roughly around the 5% mark. And you're not only investing in getting that return, you are creating opportunities for that wealth to stay within the community. So members of the community get that investment opportunity, they make their return. It's supporting a local community-owned business. It's helping the school to decarbonise. It is taking, after the shareholders have been paid, the money that's left, the community benefit fund I spoke about, may well support people within that community who could be struggling with their energy bills. It's a really good way of getting a market return, or sometimes above market return, and having your investment achieve some real impact as well.
And you spoke about the running costs before as well. So the PPA, where you agree a price with the site or the school or whoever it is who you're doing a PPA with, and you, I guess essentially as you would with a commercial energy supply, but at commercial rates you might pay 23, 24, 25p per kilowatt hour. Is it quite typical how much you'd pay for a PPA for a community energy group, or can it vary quite a bit?
It can really vary.
Yeah.
I think the size of any asset, 8 or 9 panels on a rooftop, and if you need scaffolding to put them up there and these sorts of fixed costs, it's a very different proposition. Probably not economically viable to putting 200 panels on a large roof, for example. So at Leapfrog, we've got some great tools that we've developed over the years and some brilliant capabilities, some amazing colleagues who are able to look at the economics of this and model various potential projects and see if they would be viable or not.
Okay. And specifically about Bath and Wells and our project, are you able to delve a little bit into what we've got going on and explain, I guess in normal people's terms, if we can, what are we actually doing here in Bath and Wells, and what's the nature of our partnership?
Well, it's exciting and it's ambitious.
Oh yeah,
it's really ambitious. The church, and I know the church has its own structures and governance and everything, and we're talking about a diocese, which is, I guess, similar to a county for lay people who might not have heard the term before. It's a geographic area where the church organises itself around that geographic area and owns assets, it owns properties, it owns land. Some of those properties could be domestic, some could be schools, some could be community halls. Of course, there's churches. And a lot of those different properties have got different potential for offering opportunities to host renewables projects, to help decarbonise some of the properties that they're attached to. But they also have very different functions. A church is used in a very different way to a school. School is used every single day, but not really at the weekend and not really in holidays. A church is used year round, but often, but mostly sort of a few hours on a Sunday plus, other appointments like your weddings and baptisms, etc. And the requirements, the energy requirements to run a school are different to the energy requirements to run a church.
Very much so, yes.
So there's lots of different modelling that needs to be done for different types of building and different types of land. And we're seeking to better understand in a standardised way what it looks like to try and, let's say, put solar panels on a church and how that's different to what it might look like to put solar panels on a school or on some almshouses, let's say. Alongside that, there are different permissions that you might need to get from different parts of the diocese and different parts of the church. So, if you're talking to a school about putting some solar panels on its roof, in a community model, you will probably need the involvement and agreement from the senior team and the head teacher, quite possibly governors as well. But if the diocese owns that building, then there's going to be people in the diocese that will also need to give their permission. So as well as mapping the different types of building, we're also mapping the different types of permissions that would be needed for different types of buildings as well. And trying to bring that all together to start to create different playbooks, different pathways, so that if a community wishes to engage with some almshouses or a vicarage or a school or a community hall, there are a set of questions that they can then start to ask to better understand what kind of project might work there, who the stakeholders might be and where the permission sits, and who they need to go to. And with that all mapped out, it means that communities up and down the country won't have to keep reinventing the wheel. They'll have a playbook. And we really wish to sort of continue our work within Bath and Wells to start rolling that playbook out once we've started to develop it and using it here in Somerset.
And where could that go? So like at the end of the project and afterwards, and we're hoping that we can work with Pure Leapfrog for some time here at Bath and Wells. What does success look like, and what's the next steps of this? Like, could we potentially have a standalone diocesan community energy group? Could we be having solar panels rolled out across our whole diocese? How could it look?
Absolutely, and I think I think it's good to have this kind of ambition. There are local grassroots community energy groups up and down the country. And there are some in villages and there are some in cities. London has an umbrella group that kind of convenes all of its community energy groups, which is called Community Energy London. And there's a lot of activity going on there. And we also have, within broader community energy, large organisations like Big Solar Co-op, Solar for Schools, that have got kind of more centralised models, if you like, that will go and be able to do everything for a community. If a school calls it in and says, can we get solar here, please? Then they've worked out their playbook for doing it on a school. So there are kind of thematic-based groups, and the ability, from the outputs of the work we're doing, the ability to create such a group that is, if you like, the ecclesiastical equivalent, and to start using that group or developing that group first of all in Bath and Wells is absolutely there.
Yeah, because it's quite, from my understanding anyway, it's quite difficult for lots of our buildings because of their low daytime usage. It's quite difficult for them to engage with community energy groups at the moment, just because the model historically hasn't worked out unless there's been a feed-in tariff. So the project that we're doing, can you give a little bit of an insight, without giving away too many trade secrets, a little bit of an insight about how this model could be a bit different for our buildings?
So Pure Leapfrog has always been an innovation-led charity, and we've innovated in all sorts of areas in the past, within business models, within technologies, within project types. And what we're trying to do here is to bring a lot of our learning from a lot of those innovations and to take a portfolio approach, so that if we could create such a diocesan-wide community energy organisation in the future, we would be able to hold a portfolio of projects in that organisation that operate on different business models. And the energy system is evolving all the time. We're doing work at the moment on other projects on things like virtual microgrids. So you can create a microgrid, but you don't need to own the cables that go between. You can plug into the network that exists, kind of thing. And energy at the end of the day is a huge accounting exercise. There's just a big reckoning every day. There's every half hour. There's a big reckoning of all the energy that's been used and who's used it. And suppliers have to hold their hands up and say, yeah, we supplied that bit, and it's all like netted off. Insanely complicated, but it's all run on a series of rules. And a lot of those rules are getting updated. There's new rules being developed all the time to enable things like netting off of different assets in a small localized area where maybe those assets all are connected to the same substation. There's new rules being developed to help support local energy markets, for example. And Pure Leapfrog has done a lot of work in all of these areas, and we continue to. So we're in a good position to be able to start implementing some of these new business models that might make some buildings more viable when they're part of a portfolio and part of a network of other projects than they might have been if they were just standalone projects. And on the other side, we also would look at blended finance and potentially start taking a finance-led approach. So rather than saying, what are the opportunities and where do we want to start, we could say, what could we do with £1 million capital, for example, and start taking that approach and bringing in different types of finance so that you're including community shares, you're potentially including maybe some debt where you've negotiated first loss with a debt provider. You might also have some bond capital in there, and you can blend the different capital that's coming in and apply it to a portfolio of projects that behave differently because they're in a portfolio with new business models.
Yeah, so that could potentially then open the door for those smaller schools and smaller churches that
Absolutely.
don't have. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, completely.
And you mentioned there, just briefly touch on it, the local energy network concept. I know there's, without getting too technical with it, I know that there's supposedly new legislation or new energy policy coming in and different codes, I think, which have gone out of my head.
Yeah.
But from my understanding of that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but could we be in a situation where you could put lots of solar panels on a community building like a church, and at some point in the future you could potentially, that church could trade to nearby houses or nearby businesses through a virtual PPA? Is that realistically possible?
Yes, it's realistically possible, and you're absolutely sort of in the right zone there. The rules that I was talking about, the huge accounting exercise, they're the codes.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about there. And there are new ones being developed all the time, and existing ones tested if people wish to use them differently, and tweaks being made. There is an accepted push to decentralize the grid. It means moving from a situation where we had large monolithic power stations and a very kind of like a tree, like the big trunk taking all of the energy out to the regions, and then smaller bits and out to the distribution network. And the power stations sat in the middle of that. But now we're looking at ways of pushing the distributed energy resources to the edges of that system and managing generation, storage, flexibility on a more local basis. The codes are having to adapt to achieve that. And it's that kind of work that we're involved in. And yeah, you could absolutely achieve that in the future.
What an exciting sector.
It's really nerdy. The energy sector is kind of full of nerds, but the nerds that find themselves there really enjoy it.
Oh, the world needs nerds and lots of them. So, big question.
Yeah.
Why partner with the church?
Oh, it's something we've wanted to do for a long time. It's something that we've worked with churches directly before, but sort of individual churches. It's something that we have seen opportunities to do, we've tried to do. I think there was an EOI recently from Central Church. We participated in that. We've spoken to other dioceses as well, because we've seen for a long time a huge potential in working with the church. Actually with any faith group, to be honest. And in fact, there's a guy in Edinburgh that I talk to who's part of the Jewish community and is very plugged into all the synagogues there. And again, it's this same kind of approach. The reason is community energy is all about communities coming together to achieve all of the benefits that community energy can bring to that community. And it really is going back to this investable business models that provide a real return for people, but also have impact. Community wealth building, alleviation of poverty. And where these communities come together to do this, they're coming together from, I don't know, just individual people that speak to other individual people and share an idea and say, look, that community is doing this, we could do something like this. And these different actors from within communities find each other and create this, which is great. The church has got ready-built communities. It's got congregations that are very active up and down the country who care about the kind of impact that community energy can have. They care about things like community wealth building, like alleviation of poverty. These are people who, through their weekly acts of collective worship, come together to try and live their lives by shared values and codes, and includes all this good impact stuff, right? And so we always looked at it and said that there's this ready-made network of existing communities that we think could really get on board with the community energy concept. And it's exciting to really be working with you in depth on it now to be able to try and achieve that.
Yeah, and we had quite an interesting conversation last night actually when you came down, and we were talking about how the ethos of the church and the concept of community energy, how it's quite a partnership made in heaven almost. It's like it's a really good partnership. And I was speaking to one of my colleagues earlier today about the 5 marks of mission, and it's quite clear how community energy and the concept of renewable energy, how that fits into our 5th mark of mission. So to care for creation, that's almost a given. But I wouldn't like people to think that that's the only part of the church's mission where it relates, because you mentioned a couple of things there. Things like transforming unjust structures and things like that. That's one of our marks of mission. And have community energy models, community energy groups. It really questions it's a big societal question, like who owns energy, and allowing small community groups to own energy, or local people to own our energy. That's really questioning those big structures that currently hold like lots of the power and lots of the money. And then the final one I can see that there's quite a clear connection is that tend part of our marks of mission, so responding to human need. And you mentioned it a couple of times now, if you generate community funds through a community energy model, you can help people with things like fuel poverty and helping those who can't afford to pay for their energy bills. And this is a way that we can really tackle that kind of thing. So I think there is a huge definitely a partnership there, a real connection between values. So I think it's amazing. And again, I was telling you yesterday, for the whole Church of England, it is a priority community energy. It's one thing net zero and just getting lots of solar and lots of buildings, but there's different ways you can do that. And do you want to do it just for a private finance route, or do you want to actually generate some community benefit as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think mentioning those other marks of mission is really pertinent. It's not just leaning entirely on one mark of mission. There's 3 there that you've covered. And essentially what I would be saying, we've had this conversation, but I'd say it to you again.
Yes.
I would say it to your colleagues, and I would say it to your wider colleagues at National Church. And I think they've seen it, to be honest. They don't. I'm pushing on an open door, to be fair. But community energy, Pure Leapfrog, we all of us, the whole sector, can help the church achieve its mission. And there's 3 ways straight off the bat there that we can help the church achieve its mission, and it's great. I mean,
like I said, we do have 5 marks of mission, and I could see how our other 2 marks of mission actually connected with this, but my colleague said, you might get some pushback on those ones, but there's ways of getting it in. I did want to do almost a quick fire round with you. So I say quick fire, that's not prohibiting you from speaking a bit to what you're going to say, but I wanted to do a bit of myth busting.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, I guess it's just the way of the modern world, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's lots of, you can get information from everywhere, especially with things like net zero carbon and, solar panels, renewables in general. Yeah. So I just wanted to run a few things by you. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on them. So this is just some myth busting. So first one Churches are too old, too complicated, and not used enough during the day for community energy projects to work.
I think that's been true for a long time, and it's put a lot of projects off, and it's been hard to make them work. But referencing what I spoke about earlier in terms of the developing rules, the novel business models, taking a portfolio approach, I think it's increasingly not the case.
Next one.
Yep.
Community energy cannot be done at scale.
Well, let's respond by saying community energy hasn't been done at scale. Let's also say that since the feed-in tariff ended, for people that know what that is, it's where the government paid a little subsidy for people that had invested in solar panels. So there was a bit more cream in the system there.
Yes.
From when the feed-in tariff ended to today, I would say the community energy sector has grown at least fourfold. So even though an additional incentive was taken away, there's still been growth.
Yes.
And maybe we are not yet operating full tilt at real scale, but the work is going in to achieve it.
Okay. Final myth.
Okay.
Community energy is only for wealthy or high capacity parishes and schools.
Right, yeah. So there is this view, I suppose, this perception. And there are lots of, I guess, you're getting like wealthier areas. And yeah, so it's a tricky thing. It's something that community energy as a sector has tried to address, has tried to push back on, has solved for. There are some amazing groups, and I'm thinking here of Repowering London, started by an incredible woman, Afshin, who has, she's a Londoner, and she went into more deprived areas and neighbourhoods of London and has achieved remarkable results. And there are community-owned energy projects up and running in some of the more challenging neighbourhoods, or the more challenged neighbourhoods in London. We worked with Afshin and Repowering on, I believe, on their Brixton project a number of years ago, which was their first and sort of flagship project. And other groups are doing this too. And there are things that we can do to make it more accessible to more people. So for example, where there is an investment opportunity, you don't have to have minimum investment of £250 or £500. I believe, and particularly with the support of online technologies and sort of online transactions and automations, I think you could probably have sort of minimum investments at £5 so that everyone could participate. And that's, £5 investment will still produce the same percentage return. The quotient will be commensurately smaller. But even then, it's not just about the money, it's what it represents.
Yes.
It's that participation. It's the feeling of ownership, of being part of your community who are all making this effort. So yeah, it is a myth, because people have broken that, have proven that it isn't just for the wealthy and well-to-do areas, that it is for everyone. And
I would say as well, just from like actual, in actual reality, when projects have happened, like we have some schools in Bath and Wells that have engaged with community energy groups, and there was absolutely no chance that they'd be able to raise that capital themselves, but through community energy they were able to have solar, and they've really benefited from that, not just from a running cost perspective, but how they've engaged with the students on that as well, and as like a learning experience, it's been fantastic. Sort of again circling a little bit back to Bath and Wells, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on, I mean, it's quite I'd say a two-part question, but it can be a bit of a complex question, so we can break it down as we go. But how can our churches and our halls and our schools right now get involved in community energy? And then part two, how might this project enable them to do so? Well, I think in a sense, part one and part two could almost be the same answer,
in as much as how they could get involved now. Reach out to Dan. Okay. Put your hands up and say, wow, we didn't realize this was going on in our diocese. We'd like to get involved. In fact, I think there is a village hall that we heard from directly.
You did?
Pure Leapfrog. I think it was quite by coincidence.
Yes.
It was totally incidental. They didn't know that this project was going on with yourselves. And we told them about it, and they are now one of our kind of core case studies for a building archetype. And so, yeah, the more people that hear about this, that listen or listen to or watch this podcast, if you're interested, get in touch.
Yeah.
If you're a member of the congregation at any church and you're already involved in an existing community energy group, get in touch. If you think that your congregation might be interested in creating something, get in touch. Get in touch.
And another thing that our parishes or schools could be doing right now, it strikes me just going through this project with Pure Leapfrog, and we've been working together for 5-6 months now. The importance of energy data and actually getting that data from the sites is so important in terms of solar modelling and stuff like that. Can you speak, and it doesn't have to be a particularly lengthy answer, but can you speak to the importance of energy data and how that's really important in informing decision making around solar PV and community energy in general? Yeah,
so really it goes back to the fact that this is a revenue generating, profit making investment opportunity. It's predicated on that because the community wealth building and the surpluses that have impact don't accrue if you don't take that approach. Yeah. So it needs to make money. Again, like a community shop, you're not going to keep the doors open and the lights on if you're not making money. So really, I think the way that translates through to like panels on a roof, if you like, is you only make money if you can sell the energy you're generating. And you can only sell the energy you're generating to that site if they are habitually, routinely using energy at the same times that you're generating it. And if that's not the case, then the business case for that site starts to look quite thin.
Yeah.
But if there's a good match for energy being used at the same time as energy is being generated, then you're off to the races immediately. And of course now we've got batteries, so they can play part of the mix. And again, back to the new business models, the new rules and regulations and the codes that let you do more interesting things. For a long time, community energy projects have scaled down to a size so that you're only buying the panels you need in order to meet the demand that is there.
Yeah.
Because if you try and build more panels out, you might have 3 times as much roof space as you need, but if you fill that whole roof space, you'll have spent capital that isn't then earning you money. And that means that we've sized down to meet the demand of the building as opposed to sizing up to the roof space available. And increasingly, we're able to look at sizing up to the roof space available because of these new ways of selling that energy.
Yeah. And I'm hearing there that it's quite important just for informing that financial model and actually knowing where we can go with this, actually having that energy data to hand and keeping track of what's being used and when it's so important. And it's worth noting for our listeners that our churches have what's called the energy footprint tool, and that's it's basically a carbon footprint calculator, but that's a way they can track their energy usage over the years and months, which is really useful. And for schools, they've got Count Your Carbon, and that's just ways that simple ways that our schools and churches can actually track their energy data, and that's really important for informing any future project that we might have. I wanted to switch again to some quickfire stuff. Okay. I want to get an insight into the brain of Paul. And I want to do this through a game called This or That. Have you played this before?
I'm not sure I have.
So the basic principle is I might say, Paul, tea or coffee? Okay. And you would say?
Mostly coffee, yeah.
Mostly coffee, okay. So that's the general principle. So when I saw you walk in, I thought that's a very groovy shirt you got on. And the first thing I wanted to ask was, night in or night out?
Oh, night in. I'm past 50.
Yeah.
It's night in.
Rooftop solar or ground mount solar?
Ooh. That's really tough. I think from the main distinguishing feature that would really matter to me about that is actually around engagement. So I'd say rooftop.
Okay.
Because you're unlikely to alienate as many people, and people have got views these days about ground mount and land use, and you're more likely to engage the occupants of the building that it's on.
Okay, so roof mount. Wind or solar?
Well, I think wind.
Yes.
Amazing. Yesterday, I think, in the news was the completion of Dogger Bank, the biggest offshore wind farm in the UK.
Wow.
And wind is now, by a long way, the cheapest form of energy generation. And at Dogger Bank, they've got that down to £37 a megawatt hour.
Wow.
That's 3.7 pence per unit. Now, households are paying round about 22p a unit, so a unit being a kilowatt hour, and only 3.7 pence from Dogger Bank.
Wow.
Is that larger cost. You know, all the other costs get added on because your energy suppliers have to bring on customers, and they've got marketing costs, they've got operating costs, and there's the system and all of those costs. So that 3.7 pence increases, but actually that 3.7 pence is a record low.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest form of renewable
And
energy.
that's amazing. That sort of really challenges the view that net zero carbon's really expensive when
Totally.
you've got
It's the cheapest form of energy. So wind, but solar is more accessible for communities.
of course, yeah. Community shares or grant funding?
So both are important.
Yes.
Because grant funding helps communities get projects off the ground to begin with, but then always still, I think, community shares or community bonds.
Modern school or medieval church?
Oh, medieval church, 'cause I'm a romantic. But it's a harder business case.
Local ownership or lower bills?
Oh, you can't make me choose between that.
Oh, you can have a cop out with that one. You can say both.
Okay, both.
And I know we didn't get into it earlier, but I know that you've got a project going on with the Diocese of Blackburn as well, which is really exciting. And I hope at some point in the future, maybe we can have you back on the podcast and we can talk about that more in depth. So loaded question, but Bath and Wells or Blackburn?
Well, I mean, so far I've had wonderful hospitality from Bath and Wells. Lovely though the people in Blackburn are. I was brought some gorgeous looking biscuits with a pot of tea earlier. And it has to be. Sorry, Blackburn.
That's the correct answer for
Yeah, I know.
Final quickfire question. The best community energy slogan, power to the people or keep it local?
So I don't wish to alienate other parts of the sector that we're part of,
Yes.
such as those sort of larger, more national scaling organisations like Big Solar Co-op. And I think they've got such an incredible model and such a good role to play.
Yeah.
But I still really like the idea of keeping it local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I do.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, bigger question, and throwing it back to you. What's in the pipeline for Pure Leapfrog? What's coming up?
Wow. I mean, there's loads. We've got lots of different projects underway at the moment. And Pure Leapfrog, we do loads in community energy, but actually we work at the intersection of carbon, energy systems, nature, buildings and retrofit, people and place, sustainable finance. And where any of those things or multiple of those things intersect, that's where you'll find us. And we love to get involved in difficult projects, what we call edge cases.
Yes.
We've been doing an awful lot of work over the last couple of years on supporting efforts to retrofit, so provide more energy efficiency measures into houses that are part of the private rented sector. A lot of people in the UK rent their home. And there's a marked link between rented homes and poorer energy efficiency, therefore between the tenants of rented homes and energy poverty. And it's a really difficult ask to go to a landlord and say, can you put your hand in your pocket to improve the energy efficiency of your home?
Yeah.
So we've created the country's first dedicated one-stop shop for landlords and tenants, where they can come and we will support them in ways to retrofit their homes. We've done a lot of work with landlords to understand their business models, their challenges, their different ways of working, their hurdles, their pain points. Amazingly, a lot of landlords can be as financially precarious as a lot of their tenants are. So unlocking this is really actually quite difficult. We've done a lot of work in the Northwest, in the Warrington area and Cheshire, and also in South Yorkshire, so around Sheffield, Doncaster, Barnsley and Rotherham. And we've got a great team of people doing a lot of work on this at the moment who are based in Sheffield. The interesting thing here, if we rewind to a much earlier question, is that community energy is changing. Okay?
Indeed.
And community energy and communities are getting involved and interested in being involved in domestic retrofit and increasing the energy efficiency of people's homes. And so work we're doing for a very different purpose, for a very different impact, is starting to generate outputs that could flow back into the work we do within community energy as well. So there's a lot happening there for us. We're also doing, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of work on energy innovation within the energy system itself. So our virtual microgrid work, trying to create the first ever model for communities to create their own virtual microgrid. So by investing in the right assets in the right places, members of a community could come together to effectively share energy with each other from their own energy assets.
Wow.
So that's exciting work. We are starting to develop a lot of digital tools as well. So digital tools to support the scaling of community energy, digital tools to support the scaling of home retrofits. We do work in carbon and nature. We've got some pipeline work coming up there. We've also recently launched, again, brand new, this is everything we do. It's so exciting. I love working at Leapfrog. Everything we do is innovation. There is a remarkably invisible and excluded group of people that have been treated very badly and suffered a great injustice. And almost no one's heard of this. It's called mortgage prisoners. And in the 2008 financial crisis, the government intervened and directed a lot of banks to do a lot of things. And there were a lot of loans that probably shouldn't have been made, but they were. It's not like the borrowers were doing anything wrong. It's not like the borrowers had missed any payments, but a lot of these loans were classed as bad debt and it was hived off and put into bad debt banks. And that debt was then sold for pennies in the pound to financial institutions, a lot of them that sit outside of the mainstream regulated activity. So things like hedge funds.
Yeah.
And people are trapped. They've been essentially debanked for mortgage purposes and they can't go back into the mortgage market and remortgage. They are seen as a sort of a no-go area for lenders. And there's this whole group of people called mortgage prisoners because they are imprisoned paying maybe 9 or 10% interest where their neighbour is paying 4 or 5%.
Wow.
And they're some of the people that can least afford it. And they're working 2, maybe 3 jobs to keep everything together. Their priority is keeping their home. We've developed an energy advice service specifically for this group of people because whilst we've also got colleagues that are looking at what can be done structurally to solve the problem of this imprisonership, as if you like, the mortgage prisoners, so that they could go and get remortgaged elsewhere. We've got people looking at that, but in the meantime, in a time of rising costs, in a time of rising energy costs, we've been able to develop a service where we can at least try and make life a little easier, a little more affordable for these people who have suffered such an injustice.
Wow.
There's lots going on.
That's a lot of work going on.
I know.
Well, I mean, that sounds really exciting. And I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast as well. It's been great. You've been an excellent guest. And I mean, I'm really excited for the next 6 months of us working together. And like I said, hopefully we can get you back on and we can talk about the progress we've made and what we actually have to show for this project. And thank you to our listeners for continuing to listen. And I really hope you enjoy this one. So see you soon.